Imagine waking up one day to find yourself completely alone in the world. That's exactly what happened to Delaware. In a small American town, a catastrophic event wiped out the entire human population in an instant, leaving him as the last man on Earth. But he didn't let this crush him. Instead, Del created a peaceful routine for himself in the library where he used to work. He spends his days meticulously organizing and preserving the books, taking great care to keep them in top condition. For sustenance, he scours the empty supermarkets and has even taken up fishing since, unlike mammals, fish continue to thrive. And while his life may seem mundane, Del has developed a system to visit and clean the houses in town. Every day, he dons protective gear and sets out to collect useful items like batteries and gas for his truck, as well as every book he can find, adding them to his growing library. And if he happens to stumble upon any bodies, he treats them with dignity, wrapping them up and burying them with the help of an excavator, all while marking an X on the house and on his map. As Del settled in for the night after a movie, his peaceful slumber was interrupted by the sound of fireworks exploding outside. The unexpected display meant that someone else was around. The next morning, he ventured into town to investigate and stumbled upon a car that had crashed due to the driver, Grace, being unconscious from drinking. Upon further inspection, he found a gun and clues that Grace had been responsible for the fireworks. Soon after, Del discovered Grace inside a stranger's home, disoriented with a head injury. She was desperate to leave, but the door was locked, and Del had questions. Grace had no recollection of anyone else being alive and had taken the gun for her own safety. Reluctant to let her stay, Del had a car prepared for her escape. However, he agreed to unlock the door only if she promised to emerge after counting to 100. Grace's impulsive action of opening the door causes Del to bolt out of the house. But instead of getting into an argument, Del hands her the keys and leaves without looking back, leaving Grace to deal with the consequences of her actions. Nevertheless, Grace doesn't give up easily and starts following Del, offering to help him with the cleaning. Although Del rejects her offer, Grace keeps following him around, adding a lively spark to his once bleak life. Del does share his food with her, but he's still distant and doesn't engage in any meaningful conversations about the end of the world. It's not until one night that Del snaps and reminds Grace that he was already alone when surrounded by other people. Grace is ready to throw in the towel when she realizes that she's not making any progress, but just as she's about to leave, Del has a change of heart and offers her a trial period. From then on, Grace is swept up in Del's world of cleaning houses, where she discovers that he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the deceased in town and keeps track of any debts owed to him. However, at the burial of the dead, Grace is taken aback when Del doesn't say a word in memory of the departed, but instead of confronting him, she shares a quirky habit she has of holding her breath for 10 seconds when she sees a body on the road. To her surprise, Del starts doing the same thing. Though Del sometimes longs for the peace and quiet of solitude, he never forces Grace to be quiet, even when she's blaring music in the truck or talking up a storm. One day, while Del is out, Grace stumbles upon an intricate filing system for pictures from the houses they've cleaned in his office, leaving her shocked and intrigued. Grace is on a bicycle ride to clear her head when she hears a noise coming from a nearby house. Upon investigating, she finds a dog that has somehow survived the apocalypse. Grace decides to keep it as a pet and takes it to the library, much to Del's annoyance. They name the dog Dog despite Del's suggestions for other names. As they spend more time together, Del and Grace grow closer and start eating at the same table. Grace even opens up about her past, but she still refuses to show Del a mysterious scar on the back of her neck. One day, they catch Dog destroying a book, and Del becomes frustrated. He takes the dog outside, but it ends up biting him. Grace tends to Del's wound, but he becomes even more irritated with the dog's presence. When Grace wakes up the next morning, she notices that the dog is missing from where she had tied it up the night before. Confused and hurt, she confronts Del, who admits that he had let the dog out to pee. Grace suspects that Del is lying to cover up the fact that he got rid of the dog, which makes her furious. She turns to drinking and eventually brings out the files with the pictures, accusing Del of treating people like objects. She reminds him that while he was unhappy and alone in his past life, she had been happy until she lost everything. Del feels guilty and tries to make it up to Grace by taking her to his secret greenhouse and giving her permission to care for the plants. He also ends the trial period by letting Grace clean houses on her own, which increases their efficiency. As they fall into a new routine of working together as equals, Grace helps with meal preparation and they become closer. Despite this newfound closeness, Grace continues to keep her mysterious scar hidden. One day, while exploring a random house, she finds a pair of walkie-talkies, which will allow them to stay connected even when they are apart. In the afternoon, Grace stumbles upon a mysterious house that doesn't appear on their map, but her curiosity gets the better of her. Del, however, is not pleased and rushes to scold her for entering the house. It becomes clear that this is Del's old home, and he's not keen on cleaning it. As they begin cleaning, Del opens up about the trauma he experienced when he witnessed children dying during recess. But with Grace's help, he musters the strength to bury his own mother, taking longer than usual to hold his breath as a final farewell. After finishing the task, Grace confesses to Del that she has been keeping something from him, but instead of telling him, she kisses him until he falls asleep. When Del wakes up, he finds himself back in the same house that he brought Grace to the first time, and he quickly grabs the gun they left there. Downstairs, he is shocked to find Grace sitting at the table with two other survivors, Violet and Patrick. Although Grace introduces them as her parents, Del can tell she's not fully convinced. Del is feeling a mix of confusion and frustration as he watches the two strangers sitting before him, their grins strangely cheery. They drop a bombshell revelation: there is a massive community of thousands of survivors living together in California, and Del had no clue because he never ventured outside his own town. This infuriates Del, who feels like Grace has been deceiving him into thinking they were the only ones left on Earth. He storms out of the house with Grace in tow, but she tries to explain that the adults aren't her real parents, they were assigned to her by the community, and she thinks they're nuts. Unfortunately, Del is too enraged to listen and speeds off to the library, where he unleashes his pain and frustration through violent retching. In the midst of Del's agony, Violet turns to Grace and pleads with her to come back to California with them. She's struggling to cope on her own, and they need to become a real family. Before they leave, Patrick pays Del a visit at the library and offers him an invitation to come to California with them. He assures Del that his skills would be invaluable to the community. The team of doctors claims to have made groundbreaking progress in understanding the complexities of the human mind, but Del is not impressed by their speech. Sensing Del's disinterest, Patrick hastily scribbles their community's address on a random book before leaving. Shortly after, Grace tearfully departs with Violet and Patrick, haunted by the scars on her new parents' necks and the unknown fate that awaits her in California. Meanwhile, Del tries to slip back into his old routine, but the weight of loneliness and silence starts to wear on him. His mounting frustration drives him to hurl objects at his former home. That night, he dreams of Grace playing classic movies in the library, leading him to sift through picture files and rediscover the names, occupations, personalities, and reading preferences of the people he once shared a community with. As Del realizes that he was never truly alone and that his solitary lifestyle no longer suits him, he frantically searches the library for the address Patrick left behind, disregarding the care he usually takes with books. Despite the long and arduous journey to California, Del packs ample supplies and proves himself to be a survivor in more ways than one. He has a unique way of dealing with obstacles on the road. Whenever his path is blocked by other cars or he runs out of gas, he simply switches to a different abandoned vehicle and keeps on moving. Finally, after a long journey, Dale arrives in California and is awestruck by the bright lights of the bustling city. Despite his antisocial tendencies, he persists until he finds Grace's home. However, things take a disturbing turn when he realizes that Grace is hooked up to a machine that is erasing all the trauma she endured during the apocalypse and the loss of her family. In fact, every member of the community has undergone the same treatment in order to move on and find happiness. Without wasting any time, Del immediately makes amends with Grace, expressing his remorse for his past behavior. He swiftly begins the process of disconnecting her from the memory-erasing machine. Fortunately, Grace is in good enough health to leave with Delaware. However, their escape is halted when they come across Patrick, who insists that they should stay and embrace the community's way of life. But Grace has had enough of their twisted system. In a split-second decision, she seizes the gun and shoots Patrick without hesitation. Violet appears and takes care of the aftermath with a calm and detached demeanor. As they leave the community behind with Grace's beloved goldfish and necessary supplies, they understand that they can never return to that fabricated happiness. Grace admits to Del that she feels no regret for her actions, and he assures her that he understands. They speed towards their next destination, knowing that they are free from the chains of the false utopia they left behind.